for your kind words. Very good afternoon to all. So my topic of today's presentation is on data management. So what exactly is data management? Any research study, how? By means of generating data for proving or disproving a hypothesis. For this, the data that is generated has to be the study. There comes the role of data management. Data management is a multi-step process that involves obtaining, cleaning, storing data to allow accurate analysis. So, what is the purpose or what are the objectives of data management? The purpose of a good data management is to ensure that the data collected is of good quality. Once the data is collected, the data has to be entered into a data management system like softwares, Microsoft Excel. Once the data is entered, it should look accurate and it should be a true representation of what took place in the study. And finally, the study database should be clean enough to support statistical analysis and its interpretation. So let's move on and look at what are the steps of data management. Like any other component of a research study, the steps of data management too starts right at the time of research protocol design. So there are 5 steps to data management. The first step, design of a data management plan. Your plan has to be designed before initiation of the study as to how the data is going to be collected, handled and managed before giving it for analysis. Second step, design of a case report form and data collection. For a good quality data to be collected, a good case report form has to be designed. Third, choosing a data management system and data entry. The data collected has to be entered into a data management system or softwares like Microsoft Excel. For this, first we have to choose what type of softwares are we going to use and then do the data entry in it. Fourth step, data cleaning. Once the data has been entered into a software, there will be missing data, errors and mistakes that has to be corrected and the entire data has to be transformed into a form that can be read and analyzed by analysis software packages. That is called data cleaning. Fifth step is the final step, that is data storage and retrieval. The data that is collected has to be stored securely because it contains sensitive health information of the study subjects. So now we are going to discuss each of these steps in detail, and by the end of it, by the end of the 5 steps, I think we should have done justice to the topic of data management. So the first step, data management plan. A design of plan on how the data will be collected, handled and managed at the beginning of a research protocol design. It's a single document or a collection of several documents that contain information on first, design and type of case report form. Second, what type of data management system or software is going to be used, its structure, its specification. Third step, a list of SOPs of how the data is going to be managed, data entry and data validation. Fourth step, a description of how the data queries and changes in data will be managed. And the fifth step, how the data will be coded, analyzed and finally stored. Let's move on to our second step, that is design of case report form and data collection. I'm sure all of you have seen or used a case report form for your thesis purpose, yes? Yes. So a case report form is also called a data collection form. It is designed to record pertinent information from the study subjects as outlined in the study protocol. So to collect a good quality data, a good case report form has to be designed. So let's look at the highlights of a good case report form. How it should be? It should contain well-defined variables or parameters. What does it mean? Suppose your study case report form deals with heart rate. Heart rate is a variable. It should be well-defined. It should be heart rate at 5 minutes after intubation or heart rate at 10 minutes after intubation. Second, it should collect only necessary data. Suppose your study aims to study the effect of a new drug on intubation response. Probably the temperature details of the patient is not needed and hence need not be included in the case report form. Third, the case report form should record sufficient patient identifiers. And fourth, whenever qualitative data like grade of vomiting or grade of shivering is there, we should use standardized and validated scales. For example, if you are going to assess the neurological status of study subjects, GCS scale, which is one of the most commonly and standardized used scale, should be adopted. Then keep the CRF questions clear and unambiguous. And fifth, whenever possible, avoid collecting free text as it requires coding before it can be analyzed. So what do? We provide options as yes or no, or we provide a predefined list of responses as checkboxes. For example, instead of putting proposed surgery in the case report form and we writing it as inguinal meshplasty or umbilical hernia repair, we can provide options with codes like 0 as open upper abdominal surgery, 1 as open lower abdominal surgery, such that the responses can be marked as codes right at the time of data collection itself. Moving on to what are the types of case report forms? They are paper case report form and electronic case reporting system. So, paper case report form. It's one of the traditional methods which is used to collect data responses which are then manually entered by a person into a database. So, there are some disadvantages with paper case report form. What are they? As I told you, there's going to be a manual entry of data into a database by a person. Chances of errors are more, it will take a longer time, and then since more printouts and more staffing is required, it's going to be a little more expensive. And finally, quality checks or data validation cannot be done at the level of data collection here. What does it mean? Suppose in your study the heart rate is 100. While entering into a paper case report form, by mistake, if you tend to leave out a 0 and write as 10, it continues to stay as 10 in the paper case report form till a later stage where it may or may not be identified. So let's look at one example of a paper case report form. It consists of various sections. The first section is the title. Let's read out comparison of effect of airway nebulization with lignocaine versus ropivacaine, followed by demographic details of the patient, followed by clinical parameters of the patient. Clinical parameters often include the primary and secondary objectives of the study. Look at the variables here: MAP, mean arterial pressure in mmHg, upper baseline, upper tracheal intubation, upper tracheal extubation. They are all very defined variables. Then next, the severity of cough. A good scale is provided for the severity of cough here. And then any additional significant information like extubation time, total duration of surgery, which might add to the study findings later on, should also be included in the paper case report form, followed by the name and signature of the PA. So let's move on to the electronic case reporting system. So what are they? It is essentially a case report form that has been created online by the principal investigator and available online to make an entry by the data collectors involved in the study. There are a number of electronic case reporting systems available online, and EpiCollect is one such software available. Though there are additional costs of computers, mobile devices, internet and skills involved with the electronic case reporting system, in today's world it is still considered more advantageous and is widely used by most investigators. So let's move on and look at how to create an online questionnaire. So you can try doing it later sometime yourself. Today I'm just giving you an idea of how to create an online questionnaire with the help of a few screenshots. So this is the EpiCollect homepage. There's a login option at the right hand upside. So first we log in into the EpiCollect homepage. The next step, so I have logged in, it is showing as Hi Ramya. So there are various options here. Create your project and forms, collect data online. So first I would like to create an online questionnaire. So I go to create your project and forms and click there. Once I click there, it is asking for various details like project name, small description, form name, etc. So I go and start typing each one. The previous study which I showed you, comparison of lignocaine versus ropivacaine. Let's do that. So project name is typed as lignocaine versus ropivacaine utilization, form name as lignocaine and ropivacaine, and I click the create symbol. So once I do that, this project is created with the following title. And now I go to my projects here and click and start typing the questions one by one to create the entire online questionnaire. So I go to my projects and click there. So it is coming as form builder. So I can go and choose the option form builder. Form builder means I want to build the form with various questions. So I click the form builder here. So the next step which will come is there are various options here. Text, numeric, phone, date. It is written as drag and drop questions from the sidebar. What type of question you want to type here, whether it's a text or a numeric. If it's a numeric like age of the patient, I want to type the question. I drag the numeric here and drop here and start typing the question, age of the patient. So one example I have done, I want to type the question as heart rate at T1. It's a numeric type of question. So I go and drag the numeric here and drop here and start typing the question here, heart rate at baseline T1, and choose the tick symbol and save the project. So once this is done, this question is saved. I do it for every question starting from demographic details till the end. Once you have done this, the entire online questionnaire is created and is now available for us to use. That means to start the data collection process. Yes? So, what are the advantages of an electronic data collection system? It is faster since the data collected in the system does not need a separate manual entry. It can be directly downloaded as an Excel sheet at the end. Second, there's a stepwise systematic approach for data entry. You would have seen in electronic case report form, the questions appear in the mobile one after the other. That means there is going to be a systematic way of data entry, and hence it's going to be more uniform and efficient. It is useful in collecting clinical trials that are geographically separated. And then finally, data validation rules can be set in the electronic reporting system. So what are these data validation rules that can be set? So as I told you, in a paper case report form, there is not going to be any external checks or feedbacks as to what we are writing is correct or wrong. Like I told you, instead of 100, we write as 10. It continues to remain as 10. However, in an electronic database system, we can set some edit checks or data validation rules that will give a message to the operator as to check for the wrong data entry in case we are making some mistakes. So what all we can do, we'll see. So the first step, we can make entry fields mandatory. So what happens with the paper case report form? We often tend to leave out a few questions or a few check boxes sometimes. So we'll end up with missing data problem at the end. However, in an electronic database system, what we can do, we can make entry fields mandatory, thus reducing the incidence of missing data. Let's see how we do this. So this is the EpiCollect online questionnaire which we left last at this stage. We have typed the question as heart rate at T1. There's an option, we go to the properties, and then next step is, there's an option we can make the answer is required. So we make it tick and save the project. So when we do that, it means this question has become mandatory. So while doing data collection, the system does not progress to the next question until and unless this question is answered, thus reducing or maybe completely eliminating the incidence of missing data. Next, we can set defined limits for data. Like I told you in a paper case report form, a heart rate of 100 can be entered as 10 by mistake. However, in an electronic system, we can set limits. I know the heart rate is going to be somewhere between 40 to 150. So what I can do at the time of creating the questionnaire, I can go to the same properties, but this time to advanced properties here, and do the setting as minimum as 40 and maximum as 150 and save the project. So once we do that, it means at the time of data collection, no entries other than between 40 to 150 can be made, thus reducing the incidence of false data. Third, there are also options for naming variables and coding of responses. So let's look at other salient features of electronic reporting system. Since internet is used for exchanging patients' health information, confidentiality is one of the important principles, and hence security of data in the form of password protection, and restricting the number of persons who can log in should be done. The data that is collected should be backed up regularly. So now we are going to the third step, that is, we have created a questionnaire, we have done data collection. Now all the data that has been collected has to be assembled at one place for further process. So there comes the data management system. The data management system is typically a computer system that is used for data entry, editing, storage, and transmission into an analysis package. So there are a wide variety of softwares that can be used for processing clinical data. The choice of which software package to use is often based on the complexity of data handling that is required and the cost of the softwares. OpenClinical and OpenEpi are some of the free open source web-based softwares available. Though generic spreadsheets and database softwares like Microsoft Excel are not very specific for scientific clinical data management, but still such softwares continue to be one of the commonly used softwares for both data entry and management. Be it any software, today let's learn the basics of how to do data entry and data management in any such software. So the first step, data entry into the system. Like I told you, in a paper case report form, the data collected has to be entered manually into an Excel sheet. However, in an electronic system, after all the data collection, it can be directly downloaded as an Excel sheet. So let's see how it is done. This is the EpiCollect form. At the end, when you have finished all the data collection, there is an option of download. When you click this, there is an option of downloading it as an Excel form. So now all the data has been downloaded here as an Excel sheet and is ready for us to process further. So what is the next step after data entry is data editing. So what are those? Variable naming and coding. So what is this variable naming? Suppose the question in your questionnaire was heart rate at the time of intubation T1. When you download it as Excel, the entire question comes in the top column as the variable name. Now this variable name is very long. It is not precise and appropriate for analysis. So we have to do variable renaming. So there are some rules in variable naming. So what are those? The variable name has to be as short as possible, but at the same time it has to be clear and self-explanatory. There should be no spaces between the letters in the variable name and it should be uniform. Third, for compound variable names like duration of surgery, we can rename it as duration underscore surgery. It should be continuous with no gaps. There should be underscore in between. For abbreviations with known abbreviations like MAP for mean arterial pressure can be directly used. Let's look at some examples. This is an Excel sheet. I have downloaded it, but look at the variable names here. So look at the variable names here, M1, M2, M3, M4. They are not clear, they are not self-explanatory. So I go and rename these variables as mean arterial pressure, MAP underscore T1, MAP underscore T1, MAP underscore T3, like that. So they are appropriate for analysis. Then comes coding. So once the data has been entered into a data management system, coding has to be done, especially for categorical variables. So coding is the process of translating the information gathered from the questionnaire into something that can be analyzed, usually using a computer program. Coding involves assigning a code to the information, and often the code is given a label. So let's look at some of the coding examples. So for categorical variables with dichotomous responses like no or yes, coding is very easy. We can put 0 as no and 1 as yes, where 0 and 1 are the codes and no and yes are the actual value of the codes or the meaning of the information. For nominal categorical variables like sex of the patient, coding can be done as 0 as male, 1 as female, or vice versa. However, for ordinal categorical variables like severity of cough, where there is going to be a grade, we have to be consistent with numbering when coding, because the values of the code assigned has a significance. The higher the code, the more severe the situation is. And thus, the appropriate coding would be 0 as nil, 1 as mild, 2 as moderate, and 3 as severe. It should not be done haphazardly as 0 as nil, 1 as severe, and 2 as mild. Because the responses has a grading, the code also should follow a grading. And then, data dictionary or a word set should also be maintained along with the data for our future reference. So let's look at some of the examples. So when I downloaded my study as an Excel sheet, these are some of the COP severity. COP severity here is shown as nil, nil, mild, moderate. Now I want to go and change these responses as scores. So how do I do this? So this is an Excel sheet. I go and choose the column. Suppose in this column I want to replace these responses with codes. So I go to, where do I go? Find and select. There is an option. Once I do that, it is asking for find what, replace with what. So I write find nil and replace with 0 and give OK. Once we do that, it has found 75 replacements. So all the responses have been coded appropriately here. So this is the final data set with appropriate coding. So now this looks appropriate for analysis with the appropriate codes instead of responses. Moving on to the fourth step, data cleaning or quality checks. Data collected and entered into a data management system like Microsoft Excel may have multiple errors like missing data, impossible values, and some non-random errors. So data cleaning refers to having a systematic approach to identify and rectify these errors before giving the data for analysis. So how they are done? They are done by having some edit checks or data validation programs that can be run in the system to identify any discrepancy. A discrepancy is defined as a data point that fails to pass the validation check and hence will be highlighted by the system as circles for us to take appropriate measures at this stage. So what are this discrepancy? Can be in the form of missing data, false or impossible values, any ranges or deviations from the protocol. So let's look at how to identify this discrepancy at this stage. Suppose there are a lot of missing values in my data set and I want to identify them. So what do? In the Excel sheet, I go to an option of data validation. Data validation and click this. A box opens with various options. So I go to the option of ignore blank and uncheck the ignore blank and give OK. Once you do that, in this column, whichever row or whichever data was missing is now highlighted as circles. So now I can go and do the appropriate steps or appropriate measures. Now let's look for any false values or impossible values. I told you 100, if I by mistake type as 10, let's see how to identify at this stage. So I go to data, choose all the columns where I want to identify the mistake. In the heart rate columns, I want to identify any mistakes. I go to data validation, a box opens. So I do the data validation settings as heart rate of minimum 40 and maximum of 150 and give OK. Once you do that, any data which does not fulfill this criteria, that is 300, 11A, 1080, 10, 700 will all be highlighted as circles. They are possibly the wrong values which you have entered, and this step gives us an option of going and correcting them at this stage before giving this data for analysis. So these were some of the data validation checks which can be done to identify any errors before giving the data for analysis. So this was data cleaning. So the fifth stage is the last stage, data storage, analysis and retrieval. Data logging. Once all the data has been collected, entered, cleaned and transformed into codes, the database will be logged. Once a database is logged, no data can be added or edited into the system. Data analysis. Data analysis is another important step in any research study. Various statistical softwares like SPSS enables us to do data analysis. It often starts with univariable data analysis, progressing to more complex data analysis and comparisons to derive at the final outcome. Initial analysis in the form of simple frequencies, mean, standard deviation also serve as a means of data cleaning by giving us information in the form of maximum and minimum values, any missing data or any outliers. And then data storage. The data collected has to be stored securely for a minimum period of time specified in the study protocol. Thus, to conclude, the entire process of data management is often error-prone and very complex, and hence, having a good knowledge and good data management practices are vital for the success of any research study, since they help us to ensure that the final results obtained are complete, reliable, and valuable. Thank you.